we start the lecture. Due to commitments, the president will be a little late. So we start our program. I welcome you all. Ladies and gentlemen, today we have the special pleasure and honor to host at the IHA Mr. Nikos Larigakis, who is from the island of Kopelos and has a daughter Panayota and a grandson Socrates. Nick Larigakis, Alexandria VA, became president and chief executive officer of the American Hellenic Institute, a non-profit Greek-American public policy center, in January 2011. He has held different positions with the American Hellenic Institute since joining the organization in 1987. He has been with the American Hellenic Institute for 35 years. In this capacity, he manages the day-to-day operations of American Hellenic Institute and its affiliated organizations. He directs all aspects of strategic planning, policy analysis, public affairs, programming, government relations, financial development, and media communications. During the tenure, he has organized more than 80 legislative conferences, 2 trade conferences on doing business in Greece, 17 conferences on the future of Hellenism in America, 2002 up to 2018, a number of congressional fact-finding delegations to Greece, and created the very successful annual American Hellenic Institute College Foreign Policy Study Program to Greece and Cyprus for Greek American students. His responsibilities at American Hellenic Institute have included working with the United States Congress on United States-Greece-Cyprus relations. He regularly travels throughout the United States to inform the public about American Hellenic Institute's policy, issues, and other aspects of its mission. He has testified numerous times before congressional appreciations committees of foreign and aid policy. He is frequent visitor to Greece and Cyprus, where he regularly meets with Greek and Cypriot government officials. As a result, he is regularly interviewed by mainstream Greek, American, Greek, and Cypriot media outlets on issues affecting United States relations with Greece and Cyprus, including the New York Times, Philadelphia Inquirer, TV, Καθημερινή, etc. He has been published in various Greek American newspapers, including the National Herald, Greek News, Hellenic Chronicle, Hellenic Voice, and Hellenic News of America. In addition, he has had numerous letters to the editor published in the Washington Times and the Washington Post. During Greece's economic crisis, he was also interviewed by Chinese and German media outlets. Prior to American Hellenic Institute, he worked at the National Link of Families for Power, MIS, from Southeast Asia, where he assisted in the coordination of the organization's grassroots network. For his work in support of Hellenic ideals and values, and for his strong advocacy in the promotion of United States relations with Greece and Cyprus, he has been honored numerous times. In November 2021, the city of Sparta, Greece, presented him with an honor for his relentless efforts to promote the relations between Greece and the United States of America. In 2019, the Greek Minister of National Defense bestowed upon him the Medal of Honor and Valor for his distinguished services to the Hellenic armed forces and the nation, and for exceptional service and support in promoting the United States-Greece relationship. In 2015, he received the St. Catherine Community Service Award in Falls Church, VA, the Medal of the Hellenic Parliament 2011, the inaugural AHEPA Outstanding Public Advocacy Award 2012, the 2007 Hellenic News of America Award, the 2008 Society of the Argonauts Award. In 2019, he was the Grand Marshal of the Baltimore Greek Independence Day Parade. The Greek Independence Day Committee of Tarpon Springs, Florida, has honored him as an honorary Grand Marshal of the 2001 up to 2009 parades and Grand Marshal in 2017. And he was the honorary Grand Marshal of the 2012 Philadelphia Greek Independence Day Parade. He has also been recognized with honorary award from the Hellenic National Defense General Staff in 2015. Larigakis is a member of AHEPA, Chapter 438, Arlington, VA. He has served his parish of St. Catherine Greek Orthodox Church in Falls Church, VA, in many capacities, including its parish council from 2000 till 2018, vice president 2015 and 2017, and he has organized numerous events to raise funds for his church. He currently also serves on the board of directors of the Diabetes Research and Wellness Foundation, the American Hellenic Institute Foundation, and is on the United States Board of Trustees of the American Community School of Athens. He has traveled to 42 United States and 23 countries. Larigakis received his BA in political science from the College of New Jersey and did postgraduate work in international affairs at the American University in Washington, D.C. In 2003, he was invested an archon in the order of St. Andrew, the Apostle of the Ecumenical Patriarchate. This is the highest lay award presented with the Orthodox Church. During the historic 2004 Athens Olympic Games, he served as a volunteer assigned to protocol duties at the Olympic Indoors Hall. And now, Mr. Larigakis, you have the floor.
Thank you, Dimitri. I appreciate that rather long introduction, which was certainly not necessary, but appreciated. And it is a pleasure to speak before your distinguished audience here today. And of course, to thank the International Hellenic Association for affording me this opportunity to present here today. And of course, to President Evangelos Rigos, which we go back many, many years. And locally here in Washington, D.C., who also helped facilitate this, Despin Skenderis. So it's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to this discussion. I'll make some introductory comments, which they asked me to be rather long. I'll see how far into it I get, and then we can open it up to Q&A and develop certainly more themes along the lines of that discussion. But the organization, the American Hellenic Institute, started back in 1974 by then Gene Rosidis. I assume many people on the screen here probably do know who Gene Rosidis was. He was a very prominent attorney and served as an assistant secretary of the United States Treasury under the Nixon administration. In 74, when, as he always liked to say, bombs were falling on his homeland of Cyprus, and these were American-made bombs. He felt that the Greek-American community needed to be unified and to act in unison regarding lobbying efforts regarding our government. And it was really Gene, in my opinion, who really started the concept of the Greek-American lobby. And I use that term specifically. We are not a Greek lobby. And anyone who refers to us as the Greek lobby is a misnomer. But let me also just take a moment to remember Gene Rosidis, who passed away a few years ago. And we've had, unfortunately, a number of deaths in our American Hellenic Institute family over the course of the last couple of years with Mr. Rosidis, but also with the chairman of what was called then the American Hellenic Institute Public Affairs Committee, Dean Lomas. And Dean Lomas was the first person who reached out to President Biden, then Senator Biden, in 1974, and to educate him on the Cyprus issue, and was involved in the continuing education of Joe Biden, certainly throughout the 70s and 80s. And unfortunately, just less than a week ago, we also lost another one of our very esteemed board members, who also served as chairman of the AHI for a number of years, but served overall for over 20 years as a board member, and that was Jim Marketos, an attorney here in DC. So we've had a very difficult time here the last couple of years, but I do want to mention these people's names. But again, back to 74, Mr. Rosidis started the organization so we can have a full-time professional staffed organization on a day-to-day basis that dealt in facilitating, promoting, and cultivating United States relations with Greece and Cyprus. As I said, though, we are not a Greek lobby, and it was never intended to be. We are an American-based organization made up of American citizens, and we feel that the best way to help advocate for these issues is to do it from the point of view as what is in the best interests of the United States. And it would be difficult to argue that those same interests are not also for Greece and Cyprus, at least about 98%, I would say. It's a fine line, but it's an important line to understand that when we go and advocate and we lobby, we do it as Americans for U.S. interests. So that's why I said, the Greek-American lobby at best. In that regards, the organization has evolved over the years in various ways. We are now 48 years old on the eve of our 50-year anniversary in 2024. And we take great pride in the fact that we've been able to survive for almost 50 years. Hell, there are not countries in the world who have survived for 50 years, but we have continued, and we feel we continue to do a tremendous job here in Washington, D.C., in presenting the policy of the organization as it relates to the Eastern Mediterranean. And over the years, we have taken, of course, many initiatives, including on legislation. But the very first piece of legislation that was drafted by Mr. Rosidis at the time and the executive committee of the organization was the rule of law arms embargo. Everyone has heard of the arms embargo against Turkey. Well, it was Gene Rosidis and this organization who made that happen. But back then, because we were very limited in our resources, we worked very closely with the HEPA, and we were able in 1975, against major opposition by all elements of the administration at all levels, including a lot of people from Capitol Hill, but we were ultimately successful in imposing an arms embargo against the country of Turkey. And over the years, we introduced a number of legislation initiatives regarding different areas as these issues evolved over the years, including with a Macedonian name issue at the time, the Patriarchate issue, conditions on foreign aid to Turkey, which ultimately led to the elimination of foreign assistance to Turkey back in the 90s, and other such bills as the Aegean, Cyprus, and so on and so forth, as the circumstances warranted at that time. But we are an organization with a full-time staff that this is our main theme. We monitor what goes on in Washington in all the policy centers, from Capitol Hill to the White House to the State Department. And you need to be on top of these issues to be able to understand them and to be able to act on them. And obviously, you want to try to prevent a crisis rather than to react to a crisis. It's not always the case, but it's better to try to prevent something from happening than once it happens to try to react to it. So this is some of the work that we do here, and we do it in different ways, obviously. Through our staff, we have a constant outreach program in meeting with people in the administration, on Capitol Hill, in the White House, with the media and think tanks, and so forth, and expressing, of course, our points of view as to how we view the issues of the Eastern Mediterranean and how we feel the position of the United States should be as it relates to the Eastern Mediterranean. And of course, we make the issue, in regards to the Eastern Mediterranean, we feel obviously it is an exceptionally important area for U.S. geostrategic interests. You have significant commerce, energy sources to pass through the region. Greece is an entity that's culturally bound politically and economically. It has ties to the Balkans, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and certainly in Northern Africa. Therefore, though, to be able to facilitate and to accentuate this geostrategic component, you have to have the area to be politically stable and economically and peaceful. And Greece provides for that political stability in the Eastern Mediterranean, along with the ongoing relationship that exists and has developed over the last 10 years between Greece, Israel, and Cyprus. And of course, now in recent years, it's been elevated to the plus one being the United States. So these three countries in the region, which we like to say, of course, are Western-oriented, democratic, but also extremely important as value-oriented countries with that of the United States. And when you take what is called the arc of instability from the Lebanon coast all the way to the Adriatic coast, with numerous hotspots along the way of instability, these are the countries on the eastern edge of the European Union and NATO, of which only Greece is part of both, that provide for the peace and stability, and by extension, the projection of U.S. geostrategic interest in the region. So much so that the outgoing U.S. ambassador to Greece, who served for almost 6 years over 3 presidents, which is almost unheard of, Ambassador Jeffrey Pyatt coined the term in many ways, Greece being the pillar of stability. And we certainly believe that's the case. But now at this point, I would also like to say that the 3 countries of Greece, Israel, and Cyprus are now the plural pillars of stability regarding the Eastern Mediterranean. So the work, again, not to get into the nuts and bolts of what we do, but I think that's part of the title of this theme here today. As I said, we reach out, have constant meetings. We have our testimony, as was mentioned in my introduction, that we provide every year regarding funding assistance and appropriations in terms of what we feel those funding needs should be to Greece, Cyprus, and Turkey, highlighting where there needs to be an expansion of certain areas of funding to Greece, and where elimination of aid should be to Turkey, for example. We also have a very active publications program of various publications that we have put forth over the years, including various white papers on a number of issues. None more important than the white paper that we produced with the Lexington Institute a few years back, highlighting the importance of Suda Bay. Suda Bay has only come into vogue in recent years, although it's always been there and always has played an important role. It's this organization, that I say brought it a little bit more to the forefront by many visitations by myself and other delegations of the American Hellenic Institute, and of which we then worked with the Lexington Institute to put out a proper white paper that was produced on Capitol Hill, that was presented on Capitol Hill, where we had about 200 policymakers from Washington in the room that day. And the opening introduction was by then Defense Minister, and I'm drawing a blank on his name right now, under the Cyprus government, Kamenos, Minister Kamenos. These are just some of the work of the American Hellenic Institute. And we always try, of course, to analyze various areas and problems that, that come up where U.S. law is being violated. It's important to know that in 1975, when the arms embargo was imposed on Turkey, don't anyone think it was imposed just because of the fact of what transpired and because of the rah of the Greek American community regarding and condemning Turkey's illegal actions of Cyprus. That's not the case. The organizers of this organization and the authors of the arms embargo legislation understood that you have to advocate within the context of U.S. law. And the law that was violated at that time was the Foreign Assistance Act of 1961, which said that American-made weapons cannot be used in an offensive manner. And it was because of that argument, more so than anything else, and of course, the work of the grassroots community for the first time by the Greek American community being active on a political basis, we were able to be successful in imposing the arms embargo. And the biggest arsenal that we have, to be able to use to promote our issues is the law. And this is where we at the American Hellenic Institute, I think, are separated in some ways by others, and that we always try to invoke what principles of international law, rule of law, are being violated in the various areas regarding the Eastern Mediterranean. And those are very, it's a larger discussion without getting into all the nuances. But let's take, for example, now Ukraine is number one on the list. The world is focused on Ukraine, rightfully so. What Mr. Putin did, just a tremendous, despicable act of humanitarian crisis and in violation of the rule of law, international law, the UN Charter, and every single other such treaties. But however, we need to remember that something happened, first in '74, and that's Cyprus. And Cyprus was the exact same violations of law that were perpetrated by Turkey in its violations, but no one reacted. When Iraq invaded Kuwait, it was again the same violations of international law. The world reacted, and a coalition was built to go and free Kuwait, as was rightfully should have been done, and as is rightfully being done today in terms of what we see regarding Ukraine. So we can't be selective in the post-World War II era of providing how we interpret the rule of law, because if we don't have the rule of law, we have anarchy and we don't have freedom. But you can't have two sets of standards, not one for one set of principles and one set for another. And it's absolutely correct to be able to say to Russia and to Iraq back then, but we must say it also to other countries, including Turkey, which continues to violate principles of the law, every single day when it violates Greece's exclusive economic airspace and has its official policy casus belli if Greece were to extend its territorial waters, and certainly the provocative actions that it imposes on Cyprus by continuing occupying the country 48 years later with what? It's not a Turkish army, it's a NATO army. Turkey is part of NATO. So I say that the army that occupies Cyprus today, 43,000, is a NATO army. And it's disgraceful that the country of Cyprus is a member of the European Union. So you have a country of Turkey with a NATO army occupying a member of the European Union. Well, as soon as this crisis with Ukraine is over, and it will eventually at some point, the full attention needs to be put on Turkey and how it acts in a despicable manner as a so-called NATO ally in the Eastern Mediterranean. So these are the things, obviously, that the AHI continues to bring to the forbearance of American policymakers at every possible and conceivable way. What I like to do also, like I said, we can develop more of this and some more other nuances during the course of the discussion. Let me just also mention two other things in terms of what this organization has done through our foundation. One is we started 18 years ago approximately an annual conference on the future of Hellenism in America, because we also feel it's very important to start having discussions on where the Greek American community will be in the next 10, 15, 20, 50 years. And we're not sure where it's going to be. All we know is that we have 90% approximately of interfaith marriages in our community. And I don't say that as a negative. I state that as a fact. And as a fact, you got to deal with it. And we need to embrace this concept. And we need to create Philhellenes and not treat those who come and marry within our faith, in a distant capacity. After all, Philhellenism has been an important component regarding modern day Greece from 1821 to the present. So this is the new modern day Philhellene that we need to embrace, because if we don't, I'm not sure where the community is going to be headed in the future. So we took this conference on the road for 18 years, and we produced this volume right here, The Future of Hellenism in America. We took the many papers that were presented by different specialists in different fields that we discussed, from the church to education, to language, to culture, to involvement in politics. And this book has just been published just within the last month. So it's available online if anyone would like to get it. It's about 500 pages of unique presentations. The other thing is, along the same theme, we felt we needed to be able to educate the next generation of Greek American more fully. So I started a program 14 years ago under our foundation called our student college foreign policy trip to Greece and Cyprus. Now, we identify 10 university students from all over the country. We don't take them from one university. They apply, and we look at the criteria, and we choose up to 10 students every year. And we take them to Washington for 3 days, where we introduce them, to people at the State Department, Capitol Hill, the Greek and Cyprus embassies, and so forth, and have them get a little bit of a primer. And then we go to Cyprus, and there we meet with stakeholders on the issue regarding Cyprus, and we learn all the various issues that involve Cyprus. And it's not just the occupation. There are other ancillary issues that have developed because of that, including 180,000 refugees within its own country, people who cannot go back to their ancestral home in the northern part of the occupation. There are still people who are missing. Almost 1,000 Greek Cypriots are still missing today. And we learn about how that continues to be an open wound for the families of those people. And I take them to the occupied area, and we visit desecrated churches, of which over 500 have been culturally desecrated. And we visit Famagusta, and we see the fenced-off city of Varosha, which Mr. Erdogan right now is under illegally under UN resolutions is trying to reopen, again in violation of these UN resolutions, because only the legitimate owners are eligible to come back and to be part of Varosha. And then we go to Greece and we do it all over again there. And I take him to Suda Bay for a full day, and it's heavy on the defense side because I feel very strongly that one of the most important components regarding the U.S.-Greek relationship is defense-oriented. It's centered on defense. Just a week and a half ago, before the Prime Minister visited Washington this week, Greece and the United States concluded a mutual defense cooperation agreement, and the Greek Parliament passed, as you know, last Thursday, a week ago today, prior to his travel to Washington. This is very important because it solidifies in many more ways the overall relationship of the United States and Greece, and it makes it on a 5-year and with almost an automatic renewal. There's been major investments from the United States in this regard. Be it as it may, this program has been critically important. We've taken 150 students. We pay for everything except for their transportation back and forth, because we feel they should have a small investment in the program themselves. And we've created 150 ambassadors regarding promotion of U.S.-Greek relations from a young, early age. And right now, I'm pleased to say that a lot of my staff here at the Institute come from this program. We provide them with some much needed experience coming out of college. They go on to do much and better things. And there's been many, many success stories as related to this particular program. So I just wanted to mention these two important programs as they relate to the future of the Greek American community, and how here at the American Hellenic Institute are paying attention to these particular matters and making sure that we have individuals way past me. As they said, I'm here 35 years. We all have an expiration date. Let's not want to kid ourselves. And we need to make sure that we leave behind a legacy of individuals who understand these issues and who are willing to advocate them within the context of the principles here at the American Hellenic Institute that we have lined out regarding the Eastern Mediterranean. So with that, I'll leave it there. I've spoken for about 20, 25 minutes, and I can develop a little bit more from any Q&A that we have in this discussion. So thank you very much. And again, it's been a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Mr. Larigakis, for the very nice analytic presentation and the whole project between United States of Greece and Cyprus. And now we continue with the questions. Before you make the question, please introduce yourselves and announce the place where you call us from.
Καλησπέρα. Hello everybody. Panagiotis Baltagis from Baltimore, Maryland. Neighbors with Mr. Larigakis. Mr. Larigakis, first I thank you very much for the remembrance of the founder, Mr. Gene Rosidis, late Gene Rosidis, and also the pillars, Dr. Dean Lomis and James Marketos. I want to ask you about NATO, and I'm really impressed that you said it's not just Turkish army, but it is NATO army occupying Cyprus. So is there any opening right now to put pressure on Turkey to remove this occupation army from Cyprus?
Well, absolutely. Look, right now, no one is going to do anything until the Ukraine issue is going to get resolved. However, we need to remind ourselves, and we need to remind policymakers, especially in the United States, of the kind of non-faithful ally that Turkey continues to be. They try to play a role of a negotiator between Ukraine and Russia, and that didn't really go very far. But they have not applied sanctions like every other NATO member and EU country has. And not only have they not done that, they've actually done the reverse and try to help the Russian economy their own economy, really, by providing, as we speak, tourist agendas for Russians to visit Turkey. And Mr. Kosovoglu, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, has openly invited the Russian oligarchs to come and park their mega yachts off the coast of Smyrna on the Aegean Sea. Well, you know, again, and more recently, as we well know, as Sweden and Finland are looking to join NATO, and the prime ministers of both of these countries are visiting the White House today, as a matter of fact, here down the street from us in Washington, to get, you know, to show the symbolic support, obviously, the United States will have in this regard. And it's an important, you know, endorsement, obviously, the United States, you know, towards allowing these two countries to come into NATO. Turkey, again, even there, objected. And as you know, NATO, unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, I guess, you can take it either way, runs by consensus. And just 2 days ago, Turkey said no until we satisfy certain things regarding Finland and Sweden as it relates to what they perceive to be as PKK terrorists under the definition of Erdogan, of course, and no one else, that supposedly are being harbored in Sweden and in Finland. But nonetheless, Turkey's relationship with NATO needs to be reassessed. Its whole evaluation needs to be reassessed. And if we do not press Turkey after the Ukrainian crisis is over to remove its troops, its illegal occupying troops from Cyprus, now going on 48 years, then frankly, the whole support we've shown for Russia, for Ukraine regarding illegal invasion of Russia becomes a mockery and one that you cannot take serious, as the next rogue nation will ultimately get a green light to do something down the road. But that involves the work of all NATO countries, us here in the Greek American community, engaging U.S. policymakers on this point and pressing it really hard that the time is now that we cannot have double standards regarding Ukraine and Cyprus.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
And now I give the floor to the Professor John Hadjopoulos.
Professor Hadjopoulos from the University of the Aegean in Lesbos. Pardon me?
Δεν σε βλέπω. There you are.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Larigakis, for your presentation and for your efforts to work with the Greek affairs and under the Greek American lobby. You said one of the subjects you covered was education, how to educate people, and also how to attract young people to be interested in this kind of affairs. And I would say that the Greek education has lots of material to help people understand what is the best thing to do, like to have quality in life, which is also the American culture. And there is no only this material, but also it is, how to say, we offer, for example, in IHA, a class about Hellenic education. And we put some new stuff there, which is very interesting. And I know that because I have presented that in various forums and education and things like that. But it needs also this kind of material to go to open to potential, particularly young people. And another problem that there is in the US is that the classic studies in the universities, they tend to eliminate them from the universities. That's another problem. And I think parallel to very good work you do towards the geostrategical affairs in the Eastern Mediterranean, another thing which could help a lot to go towards the human values, the American culture, is the Hellenic education and the material that this Hellenic education provides from the ancient philosophers. And I want to emphasize that because today, for instance, philosophy is dead, one thing, and it is dead because it has been separated from the sciences, for example. Philosophy is, you know, in the so-called human studies and not involved the sciences like math and physics, but the ancient philosophers, they had to use mathematics to study philosophy, for example.
If I may, look, we don't pretend to be, you know, a one-stop shop for everything regarding Greek education. That's not who we are. We can only focus on one certain area in terms of what we're capable of doing, and that's just the geostrategic and other political components and strengthening the relationship. I absolutely agree with you, though, that education is a major, you know, issue that needs to be addressed. And I would love to be able to see more modern Greek studies programs across the United States, you know, in universities. There are over 2,200 four-year universities in the United States, and there's only a handful of, you know, modern Greek studies programs, of which out of those, I'm not sure how many of them are really viable in terms of their funding and others. I see Polivia Parara is on here. I know Nina Gatsoulis is on, and I think she's involved, you know, in these over the years. But the classics have been there, they're there. We like to advocate more in terms of modern Greek culture as well. And again, we take it from, again, what is modern Greece done, you know, in terms of the modern world. And this is another area, for example, how many, you know, Greece gets no mention at all regarding its role in World War II. Zero. You know, in the American history curriculum, okay, and I've taken, you know, a lot of history courses during my days, including a lot on World War II, and Greece is not even given a byline, at least on this side of the Atlantic, and that's a problem, you know, that falls upon us, of course, as well. But Greece, you know, was the first country that stood up for almost 8 months against the Nazi Axis powers. And was the first country to give victory, okay, to the Allies, and yet it's never recognized as such, and in history. And when you look at Hollywood and the gazillions of movies that have been made on World War II, I've never seen one other than the Guns of Navarone, okay, in terms of what Greece did in World War II. And this is a thing that really is dear to my heart, and it bugs me. And I'll just give you one example why this is a problem, okay? A number of years ago, I was visiting France, and I dragged my daughter with me to go to Normandy, the beaches of Normandy, okay? Now, at that time, she was maybe like 15 years old, and she didn't care too much for getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning that we had to get up to start our tour. Well, I believe that every decent human being who believes in freedom and the life that we have today has to pay a pilgrimage, okay, to the beaches of Normandy for the tens of thousands of people who died there on those shores for us to have the freedom we have here today. It wasn't only there, but a lot happened there. And so I just felt a responsibility to go there. On the way there, we were on a bus of English-speaking tourists. And the tour guide says, you know, she was relaying, you know, various World War II vignette stories. And she talks about how the first victory of World War II was El Alamein and Midway Island. And then I kind of woke up from my, you know, sleep at that moment. Okay, and I went up to her at the first stop. I said, let me ask you something. I take exception to what you said. I said, have you heard about what the nation of Greece did? And which is celebrated on October 28th with the famous No, the Orchi and how they defeated, the Italians and pushed them back into the Albanian Alps, and in many ways contributed to the entire, changing of the war because of Hitler's Operation Barbarossa delay and da-da-da-da-da. And she acknowledges it, that I was right. But you think she came back up again and said that to the bus? No, she did not. We have a responsibility to make, modern Greece's heroic stands part of contemporary history, because as rich as the 2,500 years of Greece's glorious history is, and we know it to death, it's not well known enough what contemporary Greece does as well for Western interest, U.S. interest, and Western culture. So, and I'll leave one other point, and this is where I get really angry. I'm not going to mention the person's name. When I brought up to a famous Greek-American executive from Hollywood years ago, I said, why can't we do a movie on Orchi Day? I mean, how many movies, are we going to do on Dunkirk? Okay, which was a disaster for the Brits. Okay, if it wasn't for their own people rescuing them from the shores, okay, they never could have had potentially the fighters they needed later on. You know what this person turned to me and said? Oh, you want me to make a propaganda movie? I walked away because I felt it was going to get ugly. Some people who know me on the screen knows the kind of temper I can instantaneously have. Okay, but this is a problem. And it's a problem, that all of us face, and collectively we can only change it. But we have to look ourselves in the mirror and make sure that Greece's modern day history, which is a very good, needs to be also represented properly to the mainstream world, and not have tour guides talk about the first victories of World War II being Al Alamein and Midway Island.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Larigakis. I am glad also you mentioned Olivia Parara, because I know her very well. Really, she's very good at Hellenic education. But I wanted to emphasize also that the Asian philosophers, what developed, if we use this material, we can solve and we go a step ahead of what they did. Use it as a basis. We can solve many of the current problems. That's what I mean. I am not sticking, to the ancient Greece. No,
it's a little bit above my pay grade, but yeah. I hear you. Anybody else?
Okay,
thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor.
And now I give the floor to the Vice President of HIGA, Mrs. Gaddoulis.
Καλησπέρα σε όλους. Nick, nice seeing you.
Good to see you. You look younger every time.
Thank you. You do too.
It's my grandson. He keeps me young.
Thank you for your presentation. It was very nice. We have cooperated quite a bit through the Pan-Macedonian Association when I was president, and we did very well. I'm not president anymore, but I'm still involved with the Macedonian issue, and that's where I want to focus right now. I want to ask you a few questions, just ask you the questions, not go into depth about them. First, are you aware of the resolution 741, HR resolution 741, according to which the month of September will be proclaimed the Macedonian, in quotation marks, of culture and history of Macedonia in the US?
Is this a congressional resolution?
A congressional resolution introduced by Boyle in Florida, from Florida, congressman from Florida.
When was it? Well, give me the information offline, because I'm not aware of it.
You're not aware of it?
No.
But you must be aware of this one. Are you aware of Biden's executive order that any American citizen who is against the PRESPA agreement, his bank accounts would be bound?
I have to admit ignorance to that as well, Ninamu. Again, we're not the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee that has 200 people working full time and a $100 million annual budget to cover every little single nuance. I depend on people like yourself and others okay, to provide us with this information so we can act on it. Again, I don't take any proprietary, specialty in having knowledge on every single issue that may come on Capitol Hill. And I would venture to say that this Doyle resolution that you refer to probably will go absolutely nowhere, okay, in the Congress. I'm sure it probably has a very small pittance of co-sponsors at best, and will never ultimately probably see the light of day. But nonetheless, it's there, and I will look at it, and I will make sure, to instruct our public policy person who deals more with the Hill to be aware of it and to make sure that it's not supported in any way.
I'll forward you the information and
Please.
The bill itself, the resolution itself. And a final question. What happened to the plans of the East Med? And this administration has downgraded it. And we know the role of Mrs. Nuland there.
Well, you may have seen it. Others may have seen it, the very harsh statement that I put out regarding Mrs. Nuland's comments when she was in Cyprus. I thought it was very disgraceful in terms of her going to Cyprus to inaugurate what's called the Cyclops. This is sort of a center that was funded with $5 million from US government money. It's sort of like a maritime sea and air operational training center for maritime operations. This is a very important element that has been developed in the US-Cyprus relationship. But be it as it may, when she went there to inaugurate it, she made these bellicose statements, regarding, how the East Med pipeline is dead. And then she compounded it by saying she's going to go also visit with President Tartar, which is the Turkish Cypriot leader, which we don't recognize obviously as president, and she elevated him to such. And then when she was corrected, she says, well, I haven't been here in a while. Like, really, that's the way you defend yourself on making such a ridiculous comment? Then you're either not on top of the issues, or your staff certainly are not on top of these issues. But be it as it may, we don't support, obviously, that comment. And she kind of backtracked it a little bit when she came back and she was pressed in an interview by Lena Yiri of Air TV. The bottom line is, we take exception to this in one regard only. Now, I am personally not one of those that ultimately feels that the East Med pipeline is ultimately ever going to come to fruition. And speaking with people who are in the know, and when you're talking about pipelines that can cost as much as $8 to $10 billion, if they were to start tomorrow, it could take another 7 to 8 years to build. If engineering wise they're even viable because of the terrain between Cyprus and Greece, that's not up to Mrs. Nuland to make those comments, though. Okay, it's up to the countries who are doing the due diligence, the countries and the companies who are doing the due diligence to see if, in fact, it's their interest to follow through with this pipeline, and to do and to say what she said has all the implications of appeasement regarding Turkey, because obviously Turkey does not support this, because they support that any energy fines and resources and other areas of energy cooperation should go through Turkey. Well, that's fine. And, it'd be great, if Turkey was a team player. And the countries in the region have all said, we invite Turkey to come in and be part of this. Okay, but you got to behave in the proper context. So it was not a good comment. We attacked it. You can go on our press releases and you'll see it a couple of weeks ago. And of course, that comes off of the white paper or the non-paper that was put out by the State Department and released and leaked back in January, and of which, when we discussed it with the State Department at the time, they said, well, yeah, this is just, the Biden administration is going back into the Paris, climate treaty, and we just don't support hydrocarbons, as a general rule, and had nothing to do specifically on a political basis. Yeah, but nonetheless, again, words are very important when it comes to the Eastern Mediterranean and how Turkey views those particular comments. And from where I stand, that gives Turkey a green light of appeasement to act in the way it does. And those are just damaging.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina.
Okay, thank you. And now I give the floor to Mr. Kostas Papas, to our good friend from Canada.
Thank you very much, Strategie. And I want to ask you a favor that I'm not going to ask a question today, but I'm going to do a proposal. So I'm Kostas Papas. I'm the Vice President and Secretary of the Canadian Hellenic Congress in Canada. I heard, Mr. Larigakis, your very interesting facts you've just mentioned a little while ago. I agree 100% for that. First, I would like to congratulate you for your recent intervention with your letter to United States government, and was very positive, really. Now, I want to inform you before the proposal, I want to inform you that there is a committee that is constituted, an alliance committee between the International Hellenic Association, between the Hellenic American National Council, Mr. Baldacis talked a little while ago, the Canadian Hellenic Congress, and the Foundation Delivani Negrepondi, that handles the German reparations issue, which the Greek government for some reason avoids and is inert on that. Now, the proposal, what it is, because the Canadian Hellenic Congress is a similar organization as yours in Canada, of course, I want to propose you a close cooperation alliance, the same as the other one I told you a little while ago, for the national issues, technical themata, in other words. So, because those are international, they are global. And as you mentioned before, I would propose the first issue to the first endeavor for that will be the Cyprus issue. You mentioned the 48 years ago that is there and nobody has done anything. Now, about the IHA, the HANC and the Foundation Negrepondi Delivani, I would propose to Mr. Baltagis or Mr. Voggolis or Mr. Rigos to propose if they want to be in such a committee.
Mr. Babas, just so you know, we had this discussion in the rehearsal before we got him on the air, and we're going to follow that up in the proper context with, with my representative in Athens, who's our AHI Athens chapter, who's going to meet with Mr. Rigos and have a discussion to see where possibly AHI and the association, the Hellenic Association, can have interface on some of this matter. So we're just, but I don't jump into anything. I don't care if it was my own mother. I got to do my own due diligence and to see obviously where our interests, overlap and how we can mutually be beneficial to each other. So yes, we will pursue this.
Okay, because all right, that we have to handle it some way. I don't know. I'm not the one. I don't have any mandate. I mean, from the Canadian Hellenic Congress to do that. So we have to discuss, not today, because today we discuss other things, but we have to meet somewhere to do a special meeting in order to discuss those issues.
Yeah, as I said, I recommended that our AHI Athens chapter president meet with Mr. Rigos in Athens and Dimitris and have a discussion, and we'll follow up from there.
Okay, all right, agree. Thank you very much. You can continue.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else has any question?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is George Manios from Toronto, Canada.
Yes, George.
Okay, Mr. Manos,
I,
yes, you have the floor, Mr. Manos.
Thank you. Our distinguished speaker gave us an excellent overview of the advocacy role that IHE has played over the last 48 years. We here in Canada, as the Canadian Hellenic Congress, have done a similar role, but not to the level of sophistication that IHE has done. But we have, in the course of over 40 years, have accomplished several items in favor of Hellenism, and we're still continuing working by advocating to the Canadian government the issue of Cyprus, the Parthenon marbles, the Macedonia issue, and the Podia genocide. Having said that, I'd like to ask a couple of questions for Mr. Larigakis. Why, from your perspective, sir, the Americans continue to have a double standard? And this has been, I think, from the post-war period or since Turkey became part of NATO, and Turkey has been treated differently, or a blind eye is turned, not only in the United States, but also in Canada. That's notwithstanding the fact that Turkey has violated every norm of the rule of law and every human decency. My second question relates to the issue of the sale of the F-16s and to the sale of F-300 to Turkey. In your view, do you think that this sale is going to go forward, or is just posturing on the part of the Turkey and the administration?
Well, thank you for the questions, and they're both very good questions. Let me start with the latter question first. As you currently know, Turkey is under what's called the CATSA sanctions of the United States government because of its purchase of the Russian S-400 missile systems of a few years back. And that was the reason why they were frozen and taken out of the F-35 program at that time. And they are still currently under the CATSA, sanctions. There's no mistake here that this administration, by all accounts, seems to be trying to find ways to continue to try to find whatever loopholes or other ways to try to continuously embrace Turkey and try to create the relationship on a stronger footing. And one of them is with this F-16 business and other upgrades, to their existing F-16s through various other complicated weapons systems that regarding the F-16s. Now, we are hopeful that this sale will not go through, because you got to remember that Congress has to okay this sale through an export license. And right now, Senator Menendez, who's the chairman of the House, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, has stood very firm in that he will fight this and does not agree with this. Without the consent of the Congress, the sale does not go through. However, of course, there can be a lot of pressure placed on the Congress from various areas, and there are loopholes in the whole system where the president can invoke national security privilege, if you will, and bypass it and provide the sale based on that. That's rarely been done when it comes to arms sales, but that option is there that Biden could use. And let's hope to God that, he, of all the presidents we've ever had, understands the kind of, role that Turkey has played that's been very negative regarding the Eastern Mediterranean. So it's there. We're aware of it. We continue to speak out against it. And I am hopeful that in the end, that it will not happen. But yes, the administration, and specifically through the State Department, is where most of this comes from. And again, is another form of appeasement, in my opinion, as it relates to Turkey, because, Turkey has been saber rattling in terms of what they've seen, the elevation of the defense cooperation between Greece and the United States by virtue of what I mentioned, the Mutual Defense Cooperation Agreement, the investment the U.S. government has made in Alexandroupolis, which has become a major transit center for a lot of humanitarian and arms weapons that have found their way to Ukraine, and in a much easier way than going through the Bosphorus, through Romania and so forth. And it's positioned itself as an extremely important area for Greece being a hub for energy. A lot of energy is going to transverse through there, including a floating liquefied natural gas terminal that will be ultimately built. And that doesn't include Suda Bay. It doesn't include Stefanovicchio in Volos. It doesn't include Larissa and so many other things that the U.S. military establishment has invested right now in Greece overall. So it looks like they're trying to appease Turkey in another way. We make one other very important point, and it was mentioned in my letter to the president regarding this deal, that this would also violate U.S. law, not on another area, what's called the Arms Export Control Act, which again is a legislation that defines arms sales to foreign countries. And again, it's very clear that these weapons are to be used solely for defensive purposes and not offensive purposes. So every time an American-made F-16 flies into Greek territorial airspace, okay, and violates Greece territories through infringements, overflights, and other such violations, they come in different degrees, okay, it violates the Arms Export Control Act, and we should not be in the business of violating our own laws. So we make these things very clear. We, as I said earlier, our arguments have to be steeped and based on the law, international, U.S., and the rule of law. And these are the best cases we make, for our arguments. As to your former question, it's, it's done this for 35 years, and it continues to, bedazzle me as to why U.S. policy continues to be double standard regarding Turkey. Look, it seems to be a deep-seated State Department policy that goes back to Henry Kissinger in contemporary times, and that still permeates through many of the career diplomats at the State Department, and through certain elements of the DOD, because at least up until Ukraine, in my opinion, they've always viewed Turkey still within the context of the Cold War mentality. It's a country that is very large, has the second largest NATO army in Europe, has a large landmass, borders up against malign countries that do not want the goodwill of the United States, and they view this as a potential bulwark to be able to keep these countries at bay, okay, regarding NATO and U.S. interest, and which is why they continue, in my opinion, to have this double standard regarding Turkey. However, we point out the inconsistencies in this policy because Turkey has never proven to be a faithful and loyal ally. And you can go throughout the history. You can start with World War I, you can go to World War II, you can go to the Cold War, you can go to the two Gulf Wars, without mentioning all the things in between there, where Turkey has just never, ever proven to be a faithful ally. And just one important point regarding the Gulf War. In the second one, where we needed to open up a second front, and we had the U.S. Army floating around the Aegean waiting for approval for transient rights into Turkish territory to open up the northern front against Saddam Hussein's forces. The Turkish parliament was debating if they should do so or not. Ultimately, they wanted $26 billion with a B, okay, to allow for those transient rights. Then Defense Assistant Secretary Paul Wolfowitz at that time remarkably agreed to it. And then on the 11th hour, they upped the ante and they wanted another $6 billion for $32 billion, okay, for transient rights of American forces to have the Northern Front. And that's when the deal fell through. And that's when you had, as reported by the New York Times, a senior White House Bush official say, and I quote here, extortion in the name of alliance. Well, that's the moniker for Turkey. Extortion in the name of alliance still holds true today. And we are here, the watchdogs, to make sure that people understand this issue and people continue to advocate in a certain way. And you got to remember one other thing. A lot of what we do involves Capitol Hill. There are 535 members of Congress on Capitol Hill, 100 senators and 435 members of the House. And if you think they know what goes on in the Eastern Mediterranean, you're kidding yourselves, okay? Very few ultimately know. Their staffs, they depend so much on their staffs. The staff changeover is constant. We are always having to try to educate the next staff and the next member of Congress as to the nuances. This is an ongoing process, but it's a difficult process because you need people to canvass 535 members of the Congress. You can't do it with 7 people of what AHI has. And those are reality as well. And that's a real sticking point in my crawl regarding the Greek American community. You heard me say earlier about Jewish American organizations, and Greek Americans always want to be, compared to the advocacy regarding the Jewish American organizations. We don't compare, not even close, because we don't have the resources. Okay, the American Jewish Committee and the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee, the 2 leading pro-Israeli lobbies in this town, okay, have a combined force of almost 400 full-time people and annual budgets between the 2 of them that approaches almost $200 million. And they have another $150 million or so in their endowment funds. And the Greek American community wants us to do miracles with a $700,000 annual budget, okay, and 7 staff people, of which only 3 are of substance regarding the outreach. The rest are for administrative support. So everyone on the screen here, the first thing you ought to do once you leave the screen is go on my website and become a member of the American Hellenic Institute, because that's where we get our funding from. We don't get it from any government or any NGO or anywhere else. We get it from the work we do and the goodwill, and try to engage our members to try to become members to support the causes that we're talking about here today. But yet, we still have had many successes. IMET. What is IMET? Probably no one on the screen knows, maybe except Athena Balta. Okay? International Military Educational Training. Why is that important? Okay, this is money that the U.S. government gives to foreign countries who are friendly, and mostly NATO and other countries friendly to the United States, for those countries' military officers to come and to travel to Washington. Well, not to Washington, but to military, U.S. military colleges, okay, to get exposed to how the military of the U.S. works, and they develop relations with U.S. military officers, because today's lieutenant can be tomorrow's chief of defense. And that's an important component that was brought to my attention by Jeffrey Pyatt. And Greece was only getting $400,000 a year. And we've been able to raise it with the friends, with Senator Van Hollen, which I approached, and we were able to get it to 1 million. And now there's a legislation for $1.8 million. It's an important component. Okay, but very few people understand that part of the component. When Greece was having an economic crisis, and we were looking for ways, how can we in our purview potentially help Greece through whatever programs exist within the U.S. administrative structure, we identified the Overseas Private Investment Corporation, called OPIC. Now it's called DFC, Development Finance Corporation. In short, what this does is help U.S. companies invest in third world countries, provide security on loans and other such mechanisms. They came to us and said, well, Greece doesn't apply for this because, the average income in Greece is like, I forget what they said at the time, 18,000 euros a year. They're part of the European Union, So then we did a little more research, and we find that Malta, Portugal, and Northern Ireland were part of the OPIC program. So we reached our friends on Capitol Hill, and we had meetings, and then they put Greece in on an interim basis during the economic crisis. And this organization did that. So I'm just giving you some examples, but it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work and a lot of effort. And Greek Americans, unfortunately, okay, just do not support organizations that advocate on these particular issues like we do at the professional level. And that's just a shame, but those are just the facts as well. But we're here. Somehow we managed to do it. Sometimes I think we do it smoke and mirrors, but as long as I'm here, at least, we will continue to do this. And the organization is positioned, okay, to be here well beyond me to continue to do the work, because as we've seen, these issues are not going to go away. And you need organizations like the American Hellenic Institute to be actively involved. Don't take my next comment the wrong way. But I'm looking at the people on the screen here right now. And I'm seeing what the average age of the people on the screen are. Okay. Where are the young individuals of your organization? Again, I'm not saying to be critical. I'm just saying if we don't engage them, okay, there ain't going to be a Greek American community. There's not going to be a Pan-Macedonian Association. There's not going to be a Pan-Korean Association. There's going to be a Pan-Laconian Association or a Pan-whatever association, okay, if we don't wake up and smell the roses and then try to incorporate our young Greek American professionals, okay, into the fold. Got me going there a little bit.
Yeah, I think so. Thank you, Nick, for the insightful things. I have one comment and I think one more supplementary question. I feel your pain in this matter. I mean, the Canadian Hellenic Congress has been struggling since 1982. We have the same challenges as you have. The Greek Canadian community does not, they like to talk about national issues, but they will not put their money where their mouth is. And that is the biggest challenge. Unlike you, we operate here on a volunteer basis. I'm a volunteer vice president and I do the government relations. Now, unlike you, I only have to deal with 4 political parties. So I talk to the leaders of the 4 political parties at the federal parliament and the chairs of the Foreign Affairs Committee and so forth. But in our efforts to outreach on a broader basis requires manpower. And most of us donate our time to achieve some of the goals. And we're struggling with that. As for the youth, I have recruited over the past 30 years, young people, and even offered them scholarships. We had an internship program. Guess what happened? They took the scholarships and they all disappeared. One fella who became a crucial advocate for Hellenism and worked in the Prime Minister's office, and he was very valuable to us on the Macedonia issue. But out of the thousands of people that got monies, and we're talking about $1,500, $2,000 scholarship or a scholarship for the medical school, they're all gone. They didn't even renew membership,
Well,
that kind of attitude
I hear you.
they have.
I know
That's a
exactly what you're
challenge
talking
we
about.
have. One of the things that struck me, it was when you say the occupation of Cyprus is a NATO army occupation. How can we develop a strategy to convince the NATO countries to put the pressure on Turkey to remove those troops? Because here is a NATO alliance, a defense organization occupies an independent country. Your thoughts, please.
Well, first of all, we need to change the Secretary General of NATO, Mr. Stoltenberg, okay, who over the years seems to always come out and try to be, the mouthpiece and defender of Turkish aggression, in my opinion. And I believe now, his tenure is coming up. And my understanding is that the former prime minister, or she may be president, I don't know what the structure is there, of Croatia is potentially in line for that position. So it will help, I believe, once Mr. Stoltenberg leaves that position. And we got to get away from this context of, well, Turkey, NATO does not get involved in the individual affairs of its NATO countries, and we leave it up to them to work out their differences. Well, as far as I know, there's only 2 countries, or really 1 country that has a problem with a NATO partner, and that's Turkey regarding Greece. So it's not a good argument per se, and it's one that they hide behind. But where's the European Union too? The European Union as a country that's being occupied by a NATO country, okay? And they even allowed Turkey to open up accession discussions regarding EU accession. Now, they only opened up 1 chapter, and the whole thing is pretty much dead on arrival. But that's not the point. The point is, how did they even allow for Turkey to open up negotiations, okay, when they were occupying a member of the European Union? But you see, Turkey's having its cake and eat it too, because they, they are given all the privileges of all, in many ways. I can't be 100% sure on every aspect of the acquis communautaire, okay, that defines the EU and how it operates. But Turkey is part of the customs union of the European Union, which means that it has trade between the European Union and Turkey, and it enjoys, preferential tariffs regarding this trade. And they're looking to upgrade that customs union now. So where is the, there's inconsistencies here because you have a number of countries led by Germany. I would put Spain on that list, and to some degree even Italy, who are, they're manufacturers, and they have a manufacturing base of products, that they produce in Germany, and also they view Turkey, of course, as a major market because there's approximately over 80 million people, to sell their goods to, and it's one of the largest trading partners of the European Union. So there's a lot of inconsistencies here, but everyone's got to work on the same page, and I don't know how else to answer it. I'm not giving you a satisfactory answer, but it's you just in view of what happened in Ukraine, this is the time, as soon as Ukraine is over, to absolutely focus full attention on Turkey's obligation as a NATO member and its occupation of Cyprus. Guys, I can only do this for about 5 more minutes.
Okay, thank you. And now we go on with my friend Despina Dalmaris.
Thank you very much, Dimitri, and thank you very much, Mr. Larigakis. It's been a pleasure listening to all that you have said. I'm actually Greek-Australian living in Athens, and a lot of the things that you mentioned concerning the organizations, the youth, and so on and so forth, we're having the same problems in Australia as well. And because other speakers mentioned the idea of reorganizing ourselves basically around the world, I think that maybe this is a time where the Greeks around the world and all the Greek organizations around the world should come together and form something like what the Israelis have, because we often use these as examples, but we don't really follow them. Now, besides that, my question is to do with the books that you mentioned, because I quite agree with you. The very few people know modern Greek history, and they do not really apply it in any way at all. They don't know anything about it. So one thing that I'd like to ask is whether a lot of the books, Greek books, a lot of the Greek history books, because there are a lot of books that refer to modern Greek history and the part that Greece played in both wars, can be, excuse me, can be translated into English and put into the universities or the schools or other organizations. For example, in Australia, a Greek Australian, Dr. Maria Hill, was asked, she's a historian, and she was asked by the Australian government to write a book on the part that the Australian soldiers played in the First World War. I think I think it was the Second World War. She was asked to do, she wanted to do something on Gallipoli, but she hasn't got that far. But she did it on the Second World War, and she traveled all around Greece and got all her information. Has something like this been done in America? Maybe things like that could be done.
Look, first of all, let me just say, since you mentioned Australia, this Future of Hellenism in America book, it saddens me to say that the money that we got to publish this book, you know where it came from? It came from a Greek Australian.
Oh, that's very good.
From Perth, Conor Verbatis. And he sponsored a speaking tour for me in 2017, where I went to Canberra, Melbourne,
yes,
Perth, and of course, Sydney for a week's worth of speaking.
Yes.
And I was amazed as much you hear about, the omnipresence and importance of the Greek community of Australia, because it's made up of a large minority based on the population of the country.
That's
Yet
right.
I found that they were not necessarily organized with a professional staff the way we are here at AHI. And no one is going to tell me there's not private money, okay, that can fund such an entity in Australia, which is a little bit more of a later immigrant community and might even have more of an affinity overall regarding the issues we're talking about here than the American community, where there hasn't been really the last major wave of migration here was probably maybe, I don't know, in the early 80s at best, and it's completely stopped. And Adnan Bata, who's an immigration attorney, can give you the list of the reasons probably why a lot of this has happened. But be it as it may, you cannot put the entire Greek American or the Greek community around the world under one umbrella. There's just no way. Okay, you can't do it in your own kitchen table with your own family. Okay, so you're going to do it with the 6 million Greeks that live around the world? Absolutely not, because they all have a different degree of where their migration status is in the countries they live in.
That's right.
First and foremost.
Yeah.
And the American community, and I would say probably Australia is a close second to this, okay, have a much more identifiable component with the countries that we live in here.
Yes.
I'm an American of Hellenic descent. I don't like the term diaspora. I'm not a diaspora. I'm an American of Hellenic descent. And most Americans view themselves in that way. Okay, and I would venture to say, certainly contemporary Australians view themselves in that way as well, for the most part. South America, some other countries in Europe, probably not. So one shoe does not fit all in this concept.
Yes.
Okay, but το σακούλι γεμίζει το φασούλι γεμίζει το σακούλι. And as long as you play a role from your own individual sphere of influence, the rest paints itself in. You can't think of the whole world. You got to think of just where you are. Take care of your issue from where you are, in the country you are, in your backyard, in your house itself. Your own children, your own grandchildren. Make them aware. And then the picture fills in eventually down the road. It's no magic bullet. Regarding the books, Greek education has many scholars. It's not up to the Greek American community to do this, in my opinion. I may be wrong, okay, but Greece has many, many scholars, many, many professors. God knows how many teachers are on the wait list να διοριστούν σε κάποιο σχολείο στην Ελλάδα. Well, put them to work. Have them translate some of these books that you're referring to, okay? And not only books, but these things, unfortunately, books are becoming a little, dinosaur-like.
Yes.
This stuff needs to be put on where you can find it on Google in internet searches, because that's just the way, this generation does its research today.
Yeah, modern society.
One last question.
Okay, thank you very much. And now I give the floor to Mr. Peter C.H.
Hello, everyone. My name is Peter Theophanous. I'm from Tampa, Florida. Just wanted to ask one quick question for Ms. Larigakis for his thoughts and input. On your visits to Greece and Cyprus and in the discussions you have in Washington with the government officials there, with Sweden and Finland looking to join NATO and maybe soon submitting their formal applications, isn't this a perfect opportunity for Cyprus to also join those two countries? One, I'm sure Turkey is going to veto it, but just like it's doing now with blackmail with Sweden, it's going to expose Turkey for what its true nature. And then also, if Turkey is forced to relinquish its veto, then it would force Turkey to end its occupation of Cyprus for the very fact that it would be occupying and fellow NATO country's territory. So if you can share some thoughts, if possible. Thank you.
Well, you sort of asked the question and answered it as well, and you're absolutely right. This government in Cyprus certainly would have been predisposed to this possibility, at least as the first step, what's called Partnership for Peace, which is sort of the first step to join in NATO. Although it seems in the case of Sweden and Finland, they're going to bypass that Partnership for Peace intermediary step and be look to get in as full members. The problem is, as you say, Peter, and it's good to hear you, and I'm glad you were on. Turkey will veto it, and I don't think when it comes to Cyprus, a number of NATO members, led by the United States, are going to push Turkey to allow Cyprus to come in into NATO under that circumstance. Sweden and Finland are two other areas where they can much more easily try in their own minds define and justify it, because they obviously are up against Russian territory, and they can make the case that they're afraid of potential Russian, aggressive expansionism in the future. In Turkey and Cyprus, I don't believe a country of 1 million people, the United States is going to, unfortunately, put itself in a position to push Turkey to do so. But it doesn't mean, again, it's critically important once the Ukraine issue ends to immediately focus on Cyprus, because then we have more ammunition and precedent to be able to utilize that's fresh, and that will be the time to put pressure on the United States first and foremost, okay, to remove its troops. I don't have it here in front of me right now. Easily, I would have read it to you, but I'll paraphrase it. So, and I've used it in my letters, to President Biden and others. In 1989, then Senator Biden, chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, wrote to this organization under its late president that I referred to in my opening comments, Dean Lomas. We had invited, the senator at that time to speak at an AHI conference on Cyprus. And he wrote back a very nice letter, okay, saying how, his schedule did not allow for it, blah, blah, blah. But he went on to a quite detailed letter of response to then Chairman Dean Lomas. And one of the things he said was that it's a critical time for Cyprus, and there always is a critical time for Cyprus, none more so than now, okay, where Turkey talks about two-state solutions and a permanent presence on the island. But what he said then was, we need to make sure that the next administration puts Cyprus high on its priority list. He was referring to the Bush administration at the time, okay? And then he goes on to say that we can never, be satisfied, okay, regarding what has happened in Turkey, in Cyprus, okay, and the displaced people there, and the others, who suffered at the hands of this invasion. And until Turkey removes every one of its soldiers, they should not be considered as part of the international community. I'm paraphrasing, okay, but you can find it on some of my letters I've written in the recent years. I went and found this in my basement when he became president and dug up my Joe Biden files. Well, he's the president now, okay? So he's the administration. That's his words. Has anything changed on Cyprus? Has he changed his position? Well, we keep reminding him of that. This is all we have. We have to keep reminding them, okay, and keep their feet to the fire where what they've said in the past, and have they changed their minds today? And also that we are violating first and foremost US laws every time, okay, we don't act upon the issues of the Eastern Mediterranean in a way that benefits Greece and Cyprus. Not because it benefits Greece and Cyprus, because it benefits ultimately US interest in the region because of the 3+1. And that's the message, okay, that we will continue to do. And the opportunity does present itself that once this happens, to be able to try to get Cyprus at least, in a situation where we can get them into partnership for peace. It's not going to be easy because, hell, we still have an arms embargo against Cyprus. How ludicrous. We have a U.S. arms embargo against Cyprus. Okay, and many people talked about the East Med bill that was passed in 2019 as lifting the arms embargo. That's nonsense. It did not. All it did is say that the Cyprus can buy non-lethal weapons from the United States. But they could have done that before this legislation at the time. Okay, non-lethal weapons meaning night goggle vision glasses and vests and other such items. Well, unfortunately, Cyprus's army, or its National Guard, because that's what its armed forces are called, okay, have antiquated, weapon systems and heavy armor, which unfortunately go back to the Russian era, the Russian-made tanks, because they couldn't go anywhere else to purchase weapons, not even another NATO country, because again, it falls under this, situation of the embargo, although they gotten some things from France over the years. Okay, so these things are breaking down. These things have components that are machines that need to be replenished, and we continue to have an arms embargo against Cyprus. Yet, just a few yards away in the occupied area, there are 43,000 occupation troops, of NATO Army Turkey, with American-made weapons, which is a complete violation of U.S. law. The work continues, but it takes everyone collectively to make it happen and to keep pushing for these issues. And it cannot be done by just a handful of people or a handful of organizations, at least in the United States. This is a country where it takes you from Boston to Maine. I'm sorry, from Boston to Seattle, it takes you 5 hours to fly by plane. It's a big country, and it doesn't include Alaska and Hawaii. And everything is local. All politics is local, as Tip O'Neill said. And if we can't get the grassroots community of Greek Americans across the country to act in unison on issues of importance, speaking with one message, many voices, but one message, we were not able to ultimately move the needle completely to where we wanted to get. Look what happened. I'm going to end on this point, but it's an important example. You think today, how this whole thing with Turkey started recently? Where we've gotten, with Turkey? You know how it started? With Pastor Brunson. Does anybody remember the name Pastor Brunson? Okay. The guy, the priest, the cleric, in Turkey who was put up on trumped up charges in jail. And what happened? You had the evangelical movement of the United States at the grassroots level act in unison, got 3 U.S. senators involved, to take up the torch and to take it to the highest level. Through that, it got the attention of Trump at the White House. And he said, and I'm paraphrasing to a degree, he said, you either let him go or I'm going to destroy your economy, he said to Turkey. And in a few days, Brunson was gone. It was released. One person is important. Every life is important. And I truly believe that. But how many more, Brunsons are there in Cyprus? And in other areas around the world? When you have 43,000 troops and you have 180,000, Greek Cypriots who can't go back to their ancestral homelands, or loved ones, who's still trying to find closure regarding 1,000 missing. Those missing issue affects every single family on Cyprus. Every single family on Cyprus has someone who's still missing from 1974 that have not been able to identify, because even there, Turkey puts up roadblocks for excavations in the occupied area. So it takes a lot of work, ladies and gentlemen, and it also takes a lot of resources. And that's just the way it is.
Okay, Mr. Larigakis, thank you very much. I don't see any hand to be raised. So we are at the end now. And before we close the fine lecture, just for a minute, an optimist message, if you have, for the future of relationships generally, to close.
Well, look, the relationships are obviously on a trajectory, high trajectory regarding Greece. That's on course. I do believe regarding Cyprus as well. And you do have a White House, generally speaking, right now in Biden, and a U.S. Congress that is predisposed, to these relationships. However, you can never, ever take anything for granted. You constantly have to cultivate relationships, because as good as they are now, at some point, they're going to ask, okay, what are you doing for me now? So all governments involved here have to continuously look for ways to elevate the relationship and look for new ways, not just the energy, which is, now developing. The defense is well established. The trade needs to be, developed more. The foreign direct investment needs to be much more from the United States and Greece and other areas of security as well. So there needs to be constant exploration and cultivation of a relationship, You can't stand still on your laurels because all of a sudden it's an all-time high. It'll be the same tomorrow. That's just not the case. It takes a lot of work on both sides. And last but not least, I would also say that we've been more successful in our message resonating for a couple of issues, certainly because of Erdogan and the way he's been anti-American, frankly, and provocative. That's not been helpful to U.S. interests. But another very important component, I think, is this. In the last 10 to 15 years, you've had a Greek governments in place that have looked to highlight the importance of the relationship and try to develop and strengthen that relationship regarding the U.S.-Greece relationship. And by them doing that and providing to the narrative of this relationship, it's made it a lot easier for us who advocate for this relationship in Washington and through other policy centers to be able to go to members and say, hey, look what Greece is doing, look what Cyprus is doing, and this serves U.S. interests, and look what Turkey is doing, this does not serve U.S. interests and create problems in the region. So it's on a good path, but under no circumstances do you take anything for granted because you just don't know how things could change tomorrow.
Okay, thank you very, very much. And now we finish. I say good night to America. Good evening to Australia. And now we finish. Yes, Miss Martha, you want something to say? Miss Sinis, you raised your hand? Yes. Mrs. Varso, you have the floor.
This got to be the last question. I have a 3 o'clock meeting.
Ναι, θέλω μια ερώτηση.
The last one.
Από τη Βαλτιμόρη είμαι, ναι, τελευταία ερώτηση. Για την Κύπρο σχετικά. Γιατί κανείς ποτέ δεν αναφέρεται στο κομμάτι που είναι οι Άγγλοι, εκεί στην άκρη. Και όταν μιλούσα στους φοιτητές μου στην Ιατρική Αθηνών, που ήταν από την Κύπρο, προοδευτικοί, καλοί αγωνιστές, γιατί δεν ασχολείστε και με αυτούς εκεί πέρα? Σιωπή. Τελείως. Κανείς δεν έλεγε τίποτε. Λοιπόν, εντάξει οι Τούρκοι, αλλά είναι και οι Άγγλοι στη γωνιά. Δεν ξέρω τι θέση παίρνετε, τι μπορεί να κάνετε. Αυτό. Η απορία μου είναι αυτή και χρόνια, τώρα μόνο το λέω. Χαιρετώ.
The British component has been a very, negative component, obviously, and an instigator in the Cyprus problem, and you can say that they had a major role in creating the problem back, during their occupation. But under the Treaty of under the Treaty of Accession that created the in 1960 the Republic of Cyprus, okay, as part of that, there was a negotiation that they have 2 sovereign bases on the island that take up almost 100 square miles. That's a lot of territory for the size of the country of Cyprus. But that's not for us to constantly bring up. That's a discussion between the Cyprus government and the British government. But we do acknowledge the fact that certainly the Brits had a major role regarding what happened in Cyprus by pitting, one side against another, frankly, the divide and conquer concept of the British Empire. And we see where that's led to today. Be it as it may, it's just another one of the issues of Cyprus that also certainly demands attention. But that is ultimately for the Republic of Cyprus and its relationships with the United Kingdom to be able to discuss. I'll have to leave it there.
Thank you very much. Good night to everybody.
Να είστε καλά όλοι.
Γεια σας.
Nada.